Thank you, Dr. Kenner. So as the holidays approach, we're going to continue to ask people to get their flu shots. More important this year than ever before. And so even if you're someone who typically or maybe has never gotten a flu shot, please change that this year. And if you get a flu shot now, then it should be in full effect by the time that Thanksgiving comes this year. We are very thankfully around the state of Louisiana right now seeing far fewer people with flu than we typically would. And I believe fewer people in Louisiana with the flu than other states around us this year. And as we mentioned before, the mitigation measures that work to prevent the transmission of COVID-19 also work to prevent the transmission of the flu. So please continue to follow all of those measures, but also get your flu shot this year. With respect to the holidays, now is when most families start deciding, okay, where we're going to go for Thanksgiving, who are we going to invite over, and what are our activities going to be. I'm encouraging everyone to please be mindful of this public health emergency, to understand that the outbreak that we've seen around the country has happened because the weather has gotten colder. People have come indoors to spend more time in close proximity to one another, and the disease is being transmitted. And so when you put that information into a perspective with respect to the upcoming holiday, you know that it presents a real threat to public health in Louisiana. And so please take all of this into consideration as you plan your holiday activities. I come from a very large family. There were 8 children in my family. We're accustomed to always getting together for our holidays. My holiday this year is going to look very different, and I'm not happy about that. I would give just about anything to be able to go back to normal and having those very large family gatherings. But one of the things that I won't give is I won't give away the safety and the health of my family members, especially those who are vulnerable to this disease. And there's not a family of any size in Louisiana who doesn't have people who are vulnerable. So let's just please be very conscious of all of this, and let's be intentional. And by the way, there's really no reason to think that Christmas is going to be any different in this regard than Thanksgiving. So start having those thoughts and those discussions in your family as well, because we want everyone to be safe. And Thanksgiving is obviously a time to count our blessings, and as difficult as this year has been, whether it's the hurricanes or the COVID or many other things, we do all have plenty to be thankful for as well. And I know that our families are going to gather around the table again. And when we do, we're going to have plenty to talk about. But we shouldn't be doing it this year like we have in the past. I did want to show you one more slide. And this is what's happening with our neighbors in other states. And so you can see that we're doing better than most of the country and our neighbors right now. Again, it's not because we are doing better relative to where we were weeks ago. It's because other states are increasing in their cases and so forth. But like Dr. Kenner said, any progress we've enjoyed, any stability, it's always tenuous. And if we let our guard down, then we know that there will be more transmission. We know the positivity rate's going to go up. There'll be more people getting sick and in the hospital and eventually dying. But we can choose our path. We can't control it completely. But what we know, and this is not theory, this isn't somebody's idea. I mean, we've lived through this long enough now, and we know for a fact the mitigation measures work. So if we want to enjoy the most normalcy that we can without having people get sick that's unnecessarily and unreasonably so, then we engage in the mitigation measures. If we want our businesses to be open to the maximum extent possible, have the fewest restrictions on there, then we can do it. We can do it safely. But you do it with a mask on. You do it from 6 feet apart from people who are not part of your immediate household. You wash your hands frequently with soap and water. You stay home when you're sick. And then we're all very mindful of protecting those people who are vulnerable. If we will do that, then we're going to be able to get through this just fine, and we can continue to keep our counts relatively low, and we can save lives. In short, and I've been saying this for a long time now, but it really is this simple. If we are just good neighbors to one another, as that is defined during COVID-19 times, then we're going to get through this much better. And we also will get through this without having to go back to previous levels. We don't have to go back to phase 1. We don't have to go back to phase 2. We don't have to impose new mandates and restrictions if we will just do those things. Now, if we don't do those things and we end up with more transmission than we would otherwise experience, and our hospitals are threatened with not having the capacity to deliver life-saving health care, then if necessary, we are going to go backwards. But we don't have to. And the people of Louisiana will continue. And quite frankly, I know that there are many folks out there who are not following the mitigation measures as they ought to. And I'm encouraging them to do so. We can do better. We don't want to go backwards. And other states, including some of our neighboring states, have recently started going backwards in terms of restrictions and mitigation measures. We're trying not to do that. And lastly, some people believe that when you show progress in your fight against COVID-19, or that when your situation here in Louisiana is better than it is elsewhere, then it's time to remove the restrictions and the mitigation measures. Well, I just want you to think about that for a second. If the reason you're better, at least on a comparative basis, is because of the mitigation measures, where do you think you're going to be if you remove those mitigation measures? If they are because of the restrictions, where are you going to be if you remove the restrictions? And far more damaging to our economy than maintaining the status quo going forward is to threaten the ability of our healthcare delivery system to deliver life-saving care and have to go backwards in terms of restrictions, because you're not inspiring confidence for people to come visit your state and that sort of thing. So we just need to get through this. We need to follow the data, follow the science, adhere to the guidelines, the recommendations that we're getting from the White House Coronavirus Task Force, and that's what we're trying to do. And I do want to thank the people of Louisiana because it is no accident that we're doing a little better than our neighbors in the rest of the country right now. It is because of you. And just think about how much better off we would be if everybody was engaging in all of these mitigation measures. All right, so with that, I'm going to pause and take a few questions. We're going to have our next press conference on Thursday of next week. Tomorrow, I'll be traveling down to Port Fourchon to look at some of the damage that was done there by the recent hurricane. I'll be meeting with some folks down there. I just wanted you to know that I was originally going to be going down to do some CPRA work, but the storm kind of knocked that off of the calendar for a bit. We're going to put it back on, but I'll be down at Port Fourchon tomorrow. So I'll take questions. Yes, sir.
Governor, there's some thinking that this election might help accelerate the trend of people wanting to vote early and by mail because they did it this time and they liked it. And so it's been having this trend for a long time. Do you think any of the changes we put in place this year, extending the early voting period and extending the time to process mail ballots, need to be put in place permanently in Louisiana?
You know, I don't know if they need to be put in place permanently. But I do think we need to have that discussion. First of all, it'd be great to hear from the people of Louisiana whether the increased early voting time period, for example, is something that they really enjoyed, that they took advantage of it. They think it's important going forward. And in any other things that we did for this particular election, which we did because of the public health emergency, by the way. And so if we can see what the voters might want to keep and see what the impacts of that would be and whether it's in order, so long as we can have elections that we have confidence in and we ought to extend every, I think, reasonable convenience to the voters, because we want to promote people voting. We never want to make them have to decide between risking their health in order to cast a ballot or forfeiting their right to vote. And we were able, I think, this year to thread that needle and get that done in an appropriate way. But outside of the public health emergency, which of these measures we might want to keep, that's something that I would be very happy to have conversations about with the Secretary of State, with legislative leadership, and so forth. I'm interested to know, because I don't know yet, how many additional mail ballots were actually cast this year as a percentage of the total vote, and then compare and contrast that with previous elections. I haven't received that sort of granular data yet, but I'd be interested in seeing that. And again, we just need to make sure that we can ensure the integrity of our elections so that people can have confidence. But if we can do that and make it more convenient for voters, then I think that's something that we ought to consider. Yes, ma'am.
Governor, obviously there is an ongoing lawsuit with the House Republicans over the petition. I'm just wondering, did you reach out to the Speaker and to the Senate President in advance to notify them that you were announcing this extension, and what kind of reaction did you get?
We did, and in fact, we had the conversations with them before we renew proclamations that we always have. In this case, it wasn't me personally. We had our gating criteria meeting yesterday, made our decision yesterday, and then individuals in my office spoke to both the Senate President and to the Speaker, provided the data that we were making the decision on, and so forth. And it was a little bit different for a couple of reasons. One of just had to do with my calendar today, and then the other is the litigation that you just mentioned. Because it's sort of odd, but because the Speaker is actually the one who initiated the litigation. He's a represented party, and so we have to be just a little bit careful about how we communicate, which is a little bit unfortunate. But the communication did happen after my executive counsel spoke to counsel for the Speaker, just to make sure that they approved that taking place. Yes, ma'am.
So what is the state possibly going to do to help some of the workers who are going to be losing their jobs at the Shell refinery, since they're going to be reducing staff as of right now?
Yeah, first of all, and that was a very sobering announcement that Shell made today about the refinery there in St. James Parish. And we're going to do everything that we can. First of all, Shell is as well. I spoke to Shell company representatives yesterday, and they're going to absorb as many workers as they can at other Shell operations across Louisiana. Those people who are eligible to retire are going to be given special incentives and that sort of thing. Well, we're also going to be working through the Louisiana Department of Economic Development and the Louisiana Workforce Commission to try to connect as many of those individuals, because there was about 700 employees in all, as many of those individuals with other employment opportunities before they actually get laid off at Shell. And Shell is cooperating with that. We hope to put a transition center on place at the refinery so that we can better communicate with and direct these individuals. Those folks who might have a job opportunity, but for the fact that their skill set isn't what it needs to be, we're going to try to see if we can get them some special training. And so we're going to do everything that we can. Obviously, this very disappointing announcement from Shell, and it's one that reflects a new global strategy where they're going to condense down to, I think, only owning 5 or 6 refineries across the world. And all of those are going to be co-located with other chemical manufacturing facilities. And so this particular facility kind of stood out and just wasn't one that made the cut. Obviously, we're disappointed in that, but we're going to work as hard as we can to connect these individuals with other employment opportunities. And hopefully that's going to be a little bit easier along the river, because that's where we have more opportunities. generally speaking, than elsewhere. And so in terms of the geographical proximity of where these people live, we hope to be able to get them a job in that area and in the near term as well. Any other questions today? Sam?
Along those same lines, cited the fact that they're moving towards green and renewable energy, and they want to create these sites that have, the ability to create that sort of renewable energy. What does that say about Louisiana if they're not, expanding their renewable energy plans here? What do we need to do to land more of that investment in Louisiana?
First of all, we're landing significant investments in Louisiana around climate change initiatives and renewable energy, things to clean up the environment, especially the air. So carbon dioxide capture and storage. That's something that investment is coming into Louisiana as we speak. We are situated probably better than any other state in the country to take advantage of this because we produce carbon here, but also because we have the pipelines to transmit it, but we also have the geologic formations to store it. And so we're already starting to see investment come to Louisiana now that Congress has passed the 45Q tax credit that has received all of the rules now from the U.S. Department of Treasury. So we are starting to see that. We created a climate task force that we unveiled recently to start talking about these things. And it is very interesting that companies we think of as oil companies are really trying to rebrand as energy companies. Now, oil and gas are going to be very important for decades, but we know that there is going to be a transition over decades to more renewable energy. And so we are trying to accommodate as much of that in Louisiana as possible, but while still trying to take advantage of the fact that we are a gas state, that we are an oil state. And so we're working with these energy companies on a daily basis. And these are conversations that I've had with Shell. You just mentioned Shell, but with other companies as well. And you're going to see more efforts to do this going forward. Yes, ma'am.
It's emergency elections bill. Yes, SB 20.
Well, I will tell you the short answer is no. There are some things about the bill that I actually think would be an improvement over existing law, but there are some very concerning things. And I actually called her the other night to share that with her. For example, it allows members of the legislature to register their vote with an emergency election plan by text message. That's problematic for me. And there are some other challenges with the bill, and so I'm still looking at it, trying to make that final determination. But as I mentioned, there are some parts of the bill that I think are an improvement. So for example, I think it rightly says that if I were to register an objection to the Secretary of State's plan, that the legislature could basically override that objection, but it would require both the House and the Senate operating by 2/3 each to do that. That's the right balance between the executive branch and the legislature, and so that actually is an improvement over existing law. But the idea that legislators would be able to do this from wherever they happen to be across the state via text message or potentially email and so forth, I think is problematic. And there's some challenges around the constitutionality of that as well, because there's no doubt in my mind that the legislature would intend for that action to have the force and effect of law. Well, the legislature says the Constitution says if that's what they want to do, they need to meet in person in Baton Rouge. Yes, sir.
Do you still vote in Minnesota? Who are you voting for?
Who am I voting for what?
Congress, 5th District.
I don't know. But I do vote in the 5th District. But I don't know who I'm voting for. I can tell you I will vote because I always vote. But I don't know yet. Yes?
So is there going to be any changes with this new extension with phase 3, or no? Is it just going to be the basic same protocols?
We think we've got the balance of things about right for now. Again, we're in a plateau. We're not improving, but we're not getting worse either, except for maybe the past few days, and it bears very, very close watching. But it appears, for example, that the plan that we had to open bars in parishes with low levels of community transmission, and then to limit the occupancy and make sure the patrons were seated, and to limit the hours, make sure that 18 to 21-year-olds can no longer go in bars, that appears to be working based on the information we're getting and the contact tracing that's taken place. But I'm not yet prepared to either remove those restrictions. And part of this has to do with personal conversations that I have with members of the White House Coronavirus Task Force, along with the recommendations they send to me that we make available to you all. When you look at what's happening around the country and what we have some reason to believe will soon be here in Louisiana, now is exactly the wrong time to remove these restrictions and mitigation measures. And really, we need to be very, very careful through the end of the year, get into the heart of the flu season, but also what should be the very toughest part of this. I really don't know whether to call it the second wave or the third surge, but y'all know what I'm talking about that's happening around the country. And this was a message that Dr. Burks delivered when she came to LSU recently, both privately to me, but also to everyone else who was there, is we have to be very, very careful between now and the end of the year. As the weather gets colder, more people are indoors. And part of the reason we had a summer surge is because the weather got so hot and humid that people went indoors. So we just have to be very, very mindful of that. Look, I want to thank you all for continuing to cover all of these important matters. And I want to thank the people for Louisiana. And I want to, just say again, I haven't made a single decision relative to COVID-19 that was easy. And I know that there are people who don't want to wear a mask. They don't want to be told that they should stay 6 feet apart from others and that sort of thing. Look, I get it. But the science is very, very clear. And our experience in Louisiana now is extremely clear. These measures work. And what we cannot do is unnecessarily expose our neighbors to this disease and to transmit this disease more than we otherwise would. And in the grand scheme of things, a cloth mask is a small price to pay. And I want to remind everybody, if you say, well, I might wear a mask, but I'm going to wait till I feel sick. 40 to 50% of people with COVID never feel sick, but yet they have the disease and they are contagious. And so if you say, I'm going to wait till then, there's a really good chance that you've transmitted the disease, including to people who are vulnerable. And so that's just not a smart thing to do. And so we're asking everybody to be a good neighbor. Wear your mask, wash your hands, physically distance when you're with people who are not from your immediate household, stay home when you're sick, and let's make sure that we protect the most vulnerable. And we're going to continue to work this as hard as we can, but also as smart as we can, by trying to strike the right balance between public health on the one hand and the economy and people's livelihoods on the other. And with the cooperation of the people of Louisiana, we're going to get there. And when this ends, I don't know. Sooner than later, I hope and I pray. We're working very hard to make sure in Louisiana we're going to be ready if and when there's one or more vaccines that need to be distributed and administered, so that we can hasten the day when we can put this in our rearview mirror. But we are not there. And when you make progress, that is not an indication that you need to remove the measures that actually allowed you to make the progress. But that requires patience, and and I get it, it's hard, but that's just where we are. Look, I want to thank y'all, and we'll look forward to seeing you next Thursday. In the meantime, pay attention to the weather. Let's see what happens with Ada, and if the worst happens with it, we'll be talking to you before Thursday of next week. God bless.